Deborah, that's not a violation. That's my driveway. Her clipboard didn't flinch, just like her mascara stiff lashes. She tapped her pen without looking up, lips pursed into that signature HOA frown I'd grown to recognize from the welcome packet. Compliance is community. You left the bumper over the sidewalk line. It's obstructive. Page 12, section 4. I wrote the firmware for that model of motion sensor. I folded my arms. And the camera footage shows it never moved. Want the file emailed or subpoenaed? She blinked. Once. Twice. Then scribbled something and walked off without another word. My name is Nora Vance, single mom, cybersecurity consultant, owner of the house at the edge of Cypress Hollow, with the blue shutters and the bench my father built the year before his stroke. The HOA might govern lawns and trash cans, but they don't govern me. Now tell me, where are you watching from? Because it's about to get ugly in the prettiest little neighborhood you've ever seen. And if you're the kind who roots for the underdog, stick around. I'd lived here 7 years, long enough to know which houses had secret affairs simmering beneath pristine solar panels, long enough to know who watered their grass twice during drought alerts, long enough to know that Meredith Langston, the president of the Cypress Hollow Homeowners Association, had a vision. And it didn't include people like me. It started with small things. Unpainted mailbox flags, a missing house number digit, the bench. That bench meant everything. My father was a bricklayer, the kind who shook calluses into every handshake. He built that bench by hand before the cancer overtook his speech, sat on it every sunset with a mug of tea. It wasn't just wood, it was memory, mine and Leah's. She'd sit in his lap with a juice box and tell him about school. He'd nod, even when he couldn't answer. The HOA didn't like it, said it wasn't uniform, said it was aging poorly. Meredith suggested a new one, pre-approved by the board. I said, no. They fined me. Then came the noise complaints, my daughter laughing too loud with her friends, a ball bouncing off our garage. We patched the siding. Meredith still mailed us a courtesy citation. Leah was patient, mostly, but I caught her crying once after a friend's parent warned her not to hang around that house with the violations. I didn't tell her I'd heard. I just hugged her longer the next day, made pancakes from scratch. She thinks I don't see how hard she tries to fit in here. She's 17, smart, sharp-eyed, already an intern with the municipal youth court program. There's a quiet strength in her. It scares them. They don't like what they can't control. The next morning, the same warning was taped to the bench. Structure must comply with aesthetic guidelines. No name, no date, just HOA letterhead in that smug serif font. I stood there, fingers trembling, not with fear but with restraint. That bench isn't going anywhere, I thought. You'll move it over my body. I took it inside that day. Not because I was backing down, because I was preparing. You see, there's a difference between reacting and retaliating. I didn't move into Cypress Hollow to be liked. I moved here to raise my daughter in the home my father left me free and clear. I hadn't planned on fighting anyone. But they'd brought the fight to my porch. And when you do that to a woman who protects government firewalls for a living, you better hope she doesn't decide to turn that same attention on you. Checkmate doesn't start with a queen. It starts with a pawn pretending not to notice the rook inching forward. This isn't a story about compliance, it's about boundaries and what happens when you cross them. Next time, they'd try to cross the line again. But I was already reprogramming the board. I caught her again the next morning. Not Meredith this time, someone newer. Slender frame, stiff cardigan, same clipboard. She was standing across the street pretending to admire Mrs. Hale's chrysanthemums while her phone just so happened to be pointed at my front yard. I opened the door without stepping out. Need a better angle? I've got a drone cam that loops higher resolution footage. She jumped, nearly dropped her phone, then walked away like I'd spoken Greek. Another messenger, same queen. By now I wasn't just angry, I was cataloging. The bench, stored safe in my garage, away from their little power games, wasn't even the problem anymore. It was what it stood for. Meredith didn't care about wood or design. She cared about precedent. If someone like me ignored a fine and didn't fold, someone else might think they could do the same. And the funny thing about control, it's fragile when people stop pretending. That evening, Leah was pacing the living room with her laptop open and her hair in a bun she didn't realize had come loose. her youth court paperwork scattered across the coffee table like war maps. "You okay?" I asked. She didn't look up. "Just prepping for mock reviews tomorrow. They're running scenarios on property disputes." That made me laugh. "They should just call Meredith. She'll give you 50 by breakfast." Leah cracked a smile but didn't say anything. Her fingers stilled on the keyboard. After a moment, she said, "Mrs. Langston cornered me after school today." I put the tea kettle down slower than I meant to. "What'd she say?" "That it's unwise for minors to live in houses where fines go unpaid. Said it affects neighborhood reputation." I sat down across from her. "You didn't tell her anything, right?" Leah scoffed. "I told her I was learning about rights." She didn't like that. I reached over and adjusted her hair, pulled the pin back into place. There was something about watching your child get pulled into the same fight you thought you could shield them from. It was grief disguised as boiling focus. That night, I checked the HOA site. New updates. Fines were now public. My name was highlighted in red. Repeat noncompliance. A quiet little scarlet letter, broadcast for the whole block. Meredith was getting bolder. She was laying the groundwork for isolation. Humiliate me, make the house the problem, then push until I either bend or sell. I clicked through the site's source code, fingers twitching on instinct. No need to hack anything, just curiosity. But there it was. A back-end page, hidden from regular members. Marked, watch list. 10 names. Mine was first. Leah's name was nested beneath it. I froze. This wasn't governance, it was surveillance. Meredith wasn't just enforcing rules, she was compiling targets. I didn't sleep that night. I walked the yard twice, checked our security cams, reviewed the bench footage. Nothing new, but that didn't settle anything. In the morning, I found Diane Trent on my doorstep, holding a piece of paper with shaking hands. "Morning," she said softly, like someone whose words were being measured by someone else. "Need something?" I asked, stepping just far enough to block her view into the hallway. She cleared her throat. "I'm here to serve notice of an emergency hearing regarding non-compliant behavior." Her eyes didn't meet mine. "Let me guess," I said. "Bench?" She hesitated. "And?" "Yard aesthetics." "It's the vote. Meredith called it yesterday." I took the paper. Diane flinched when our hands brushed. Her clipboard trembled like a leaf. She wasn't evil. She was scared. "They make you nervous?" I asked. She said nothing. "They we watching your house too, Diane?" Still nothing, but her throat twitched. A swallow, her gaze dropped. I let her go without pushing further. But I'd seen it. A crack. Cracks are all you need when you're planning to collapse something built on fear. By the end of the week, the citations doubled. One for a low-hanging tree branch, one for a prohibited decorative element, a wind chime my daughter made when she was 10. You know what I did? I bought 2 more chimes. Different keys, let the wind do the talking. I wasn't going to start a war, but I was absolutely going to finish one. The HOA hearing was scheduled for Saturday morning. Not a courtroom, not even a proper hall, just folding chairs in the Cypress Hollow community rec room, right next to the vending machines and the broken ping-pong table with one leg propped up on an encyclopedia from 1989. I brought coffee, not to be polite, just to remind them I wasn't rattled. Leah stayed home. I told her it was nothing serious. That wasn't true. Meredith didn't call these hearings unless she smelled blood in the water. She entered the room last, as always, hair sprayed stiff, pearls clinking faintly against her collar, a clipboard in one hand, a travel mug in the other, probably filled with control-flavored coffee. Behind her came Diane. Clipboard, yes, but no pearls. Just a blue scarf looped twice, her eyes shadowed and unreadable. She didn't sit next to Meredith. She didn't sit near anyone. That was the first sign. The second came when the meeting began and Meredith cleared her throat loud enough to make a child flinch. "We're here to address ongoing violations at 102 Cedar Way," she began. "The list is extensive. Some include noise, yard decor, misuse of private space, and failure to comply with visual uniformity codes." I raised a brow. "You mean the wind chimes?" She didn't acknowledge that, just kept reading. "Additionally," she added, lips tightening, "we have concerns regarding behavioral escalation and intimidation of board members." Ellen made me laugh. "You're saying I intimidated someone with a wind chime?" Silence. Diane scribbled something. Her pen shook. Her knuckles were white. Meredith pressed on. The board recommends probationary status for the homeowner in question. If behavior continues, further actions may be considered, up to and including a forced compliance vote. I leaned forward. There's no clause for probation in the charter? She blinked. Excuse me? There's no such thing as probationary status in our HOA bylaws. I read the charter last night. I also cross-referenced the amendment logs. No votes, no ratified language. You made it up. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. Diane's pen froze. Meredith, to her credit, didn't flinch. We reserve discretionary authority under Section 9C. You mean the section labeled Suggestions for Future Amendment Consideration? More shifting. One of the newer members scratched his neck. Someone coughed. I'll be challenging this, I said calmly, and I'll be requesting full access to the meeting minutes, including last month's vote logs. Now Diane looked up. She met my eyes, only for a second, but it was enough. There was guilt there, not fear. Guilt. The meeting ended without a resolution. Meredith called it a continuing deliberation. I called it a stalling tactic. As I packed up, Diane lingered. Everyone else filtered out, the ones who came just to watch someone burn. The smell of old carpet and vending machine coffee stuck to the walls. Diane hovered by the doorway, hands still full of her clipboard and a rolled-up agenda sheet. I didn't move. I let her speak first. You were right, she said finally, voice low. There's no probation clause. Then why'd you stay quiet? She looked down. Because I voted yes last time. I signed off on the fine notices. I didn't question it. You're not the only one, I said, but you're the only one who didn't look away today. She hesitated. Her jaw worked for a second, chewing something invisible. There's more, she whispered, but I can't, not here. She turned to leave. Before she did, she pulled something from the inside pocket of her coat, a yellow Post-it, folded in half. Look up the minutes from April 2021, she said. Compare them to what's online now. Then she walked out the side exit. No goodbye, no apology. But that was okay. It wasn't time for apologies. It was time for records. That night, I stayed up cross-checking timestamps. She was right. The official log listed a unanimous vote for a landscaping standard, but in the archived PDF, dated, signed, and uploaded by mistake months ago, the motion had failed. Meredith had doctored it. They weren't just enforcing fake rules. They were fabricating the votes. Now I knew two things for certain. 1, Diane was cracking. 2, this wasn't mismanagement, it was manipulation. They'd faked a past to control the present. And I don't know about you, but I don't let liars write my history. What would you do if your community started rewriting the past to control your future? Would you stay silent like Diane, or start digging like Nora? Tell me below, what city are you watching from, and have you ever dealt with HOA drama this deep? The sirens were soft, more suggestion than warning, but I still dropped the dish towel when I heard them. From the window above the sink, I saw the cruiser pull up slow. Not fast like an emergency, slow like someone wanted it to be seen. Leah was in the front yard, standing by the porch railing, chatting with Milo, the neighbor's kid. He held a science project under one arm and was clearly explaining something only a teenager could care about with that much intensity. And yet, 2 officers stepped out of the car. I opened the door before they even hit the curb. Ma'am, the taller one said, adjusting his belt, we received a report of a disturbance involving shouting and possible aggression. Does your daughter live here? The way he asked it made my teeth itch. Yes, she does, and there's no disturbance. She was talking to a classmate about a model volcano. You can ask him, he's holding the lava. Leah turned, saw the uniforms, and froze. Her jaw was tight, her shoulders locked. She didn't speak. I walked halfway down the driveway, palms open. Who made the report? The officer hesitated. Anonymous said there was an escalating argument involving a minor and suspected verbal threats. That's when Meredith stepped out from her front porch, arms folded, lips pursed. Of course, she didn't have to call with her name. All she needed was her voice and a few words about safety. That was enough to mobilize suspicion. The officer nodded toward Leah. May we speak to your daughter? Luckily, Leah said, stepping forward. "You can speak to me directly." Her voice was even, not loud, not angry, just steady. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small black badge holder, flipped it open and held it up. "Municipal Youth Corps internship. Official ID signed by the city." The shorter officer blinked, his posture changed. Slightly. "Ha! Are you identifying yourself as a legal observer?" "Yes, sir. I'm a registered Youth Corps intern. I'm trained to monitor procedural fairness in juvenile cases. This interaction is being documented." Dead. Silence. I swear you could hear Meredith's earrings jangling from across the street. The taller officer cleared his throat, suddenly more polite. "Is your parent home?" "I'm here," I said, stepping forward, lips twitching. "And this," I pointed toward Leah, "is the minor in question. Would you like to see our security footage from the past 15 minutes? The cops conferred quietly. One muttered something about waste of time and false report protocol. They walked back to the cruiser without another word. Meredith didn't move. Leah kept her badge visible until the car rolled away. Then she slipped it back in her bag like it was just another pencil. I let the silence hang before I spoke. "You okay?" She exhaled. "A little shaky, but she won't do that again." "You sure?" "She underestimated me." Leah looked over at Meredith, "and she hates being surprised." That was the moment I stopped worrying. Not about Meredith, not about the HOA, not even about what came next. Leah had crossed a threshold, quietly, cleanly. She didn't yell, she didn't argue. She stood her ground with facts and composure. That shook them more than 1,000 protests ever could. That night, I took the wind chimes down, not to surrender, but to change tactics. We weren't going to be loud anymore. We were going to be right, which is louder than anything they've got. Inside, I opened the folder I'd started 2 nights ago. I labeled it Charter Discrepancies. I printed out the April 2021 minutes, highlighted the altered passages, and added Diane's post-it to the cover. I wasn't just documenting now. I was building a case. They'd faked votes, they'd used fines as intimidation, and now they'd weaponized the police. Problem was, they made one mistake. They came for the wrong kid. I couldn't sleep after the police came. It wasn't fear, it was momentum. Meredith had escalated and Leah had shut her down with a badge, but that kind of public defeat? It doesn't just end things, it pushes them deeper underground. By 2 a.m. I was pacing. The chimes were gone, the porch was quiet. Leah was asleep, her bag zipped tight with that badge like a shield under her pillow. I ended up in the garage. Not to tinker or clean, just to look. My father's old cabinet sat in the far corner, under 2 boxes of Christmas lights we hadn't used in years. A dented shop lamp hung above it, bulb flickering like it was deciding whether to burn out or keep watching. The lock was rusted but still intact. I reached behind the frame, same place he always kept the spare key taped in wax paper. It slid open with a groan. Inside, a stack of folders, bound with cracked rubber bands, rolled up blueprints, a wooden box with a tarnished brass latch. Everything smelled like cedar and oil and faint regret. I pulled the folders out one by one. HOA meeting notes, handwritten, not typed, dated back to 1996. Some had coffee rings, others had post-its stuck between pages. My father's looping script filled the margins. He documented everything. His notes weren't angry, they were precise, just like him. One page had 3 names circled with question marks. Another had a note in red ink, Clause 3A, drafted without majority present. He'd seen it too, even back then. I opened the wooden box last. Inside, under a folded handkerchief, was a black notebook with frayed edges and a gold corner missing. When I flipped it open, something fell out. A Polaroid. It was me, maybe 12, sitting on the bench with a juice box. My dad was next to me, mid-laugh, holding a manila envelope. In the background, the HOA signboard, freshly painted. He knew even then it wouldn't last, that something needed to be saved, and he made sure I'd find it when the time was right. I turned the notebook over and noticed something scribbled on the inside back cover. If they come for the neighborhood, make them remember the vote. Tom Vance. The handwriting was faint but firm, and right below it, taped with aging electrical tape, was a copy of the original Cypress Hollow Charter. Stamped, signed, unamended. No hidden clauses, no backdated probation language, no fine multipliers for yard aesthetics. The founding version. I sat back on the cold floor, surrounded by his words, my fingers tracing each column. He'd hidden it all in plain sight, waiting, not just for anyone, but for me. The next morning, I scanned everything. Uploaded copies to 2 cloud servers, printed backups, labeled them by hand. Then, I called Victor Hale. He answered on the second ring, groggy. "Is it Meredith?" "Worse," I said. "It's my dad's handwriting, and it's about to change everything." That got his attention. I told him what I'd found, the files, the charter, the doctored votes. He didn't interrupt once, just listened, breathing through his nose like someone sharpening a knife. "You're sitting on dynamite," he said finally, "and they've been building a house of straw. I need help making sure it burns clean. I'll be over in 2 hours." By noon, we were sitting at my kitchen table, Leah watching quietly from the doorway, still processing everything from the day before. Victor laid out the plan. First, we present the founding charter as evidence. Second, we demonstrate that the digital records Meredith's been using are falsified. Third, we remind everyone that the HOA is bound by vote, not dictatorship. "And Diane?" I asked. "She needs to flip, but she's already teetering. You'll just need to push, gently." The folder of originals sat between us like a loaded weapon, my dad's bench visible through the window. Still there. Still waiting. They'd erased history to rewrite the rules. But we had the first draft. And the original author? He raised me. Victor tapped the original charter with the back of his pen like it was glass he was about to break. "This," he said, "is not just a founding document. This is a weapon." He adjusted his glasses, spread the old paper out across the table, and pointed to a small line at the bottom of the second page, one I'd missed the night before. Clause 7, right here. I squinted, faded ink, but clear enough. In matters of neighborhood governance, a supermajority of residents may override any HOA ruling or officer authority through a special assembly motion. Victor looked up. "They buried this, that's why no one's ever seen it." "And Diane?" He nodded. "Her vote helped pass that landscaping mandate in 21, right?" "Supposedly," I said, "but the original minutes show the motion failed." "Exactly. That vote didn't pass and Meredith pretended it did. You've got a fake record and a forgotten clause. That's fraud and suppression." Leah wandered in holding 2 mugs, handed one to Victor, then sat next to me. She didn't say anything, just set her municipal ID beside the folder like a badge on a chessboard. Victor smiled. "You're quiet." She shrugged. "I figure everyone else talks enough around here." It was the first time I saw him pause. He leaned back in the chair, nodded slowly. "Smart kid." I stood and crossed to the window. The porch bench sat beneath the magnolia tree, my father's tree, the one he planted the day the HOA incorporated. It bloomed late this year. Only 2 flowers had opened. But they were bright, defiant. "They're gonna fight this," I said. "Meredith won't back down easy. She'll throw procedural jargon, technicalities, maybe even accuse us of falsifying these documents." Victor stood and stretched his back. "Then we'll fight it with process, legally, clean. No noise, no chaos, just truth." He paused. "And you'll need a few neighbors on your side. Supermajority's 75%. That's 12 out of 16 homes." He nodded. "I can get 5, I said, but Meredith's got loyalty. Fear does that." Victor looked down at the notebook again. "Your dad left you the truth. Now you've got to give people a reason to believe it matters." Later that evening, I walked house to house. Not with flyers. With a folder in one hand and a stack of scanned records in the other. I didn't plead, I didn't beg, I just explained, once to each of them. And I watched their reactions. One neighbor, a retired fire captain, read the clause 3 times before nodding slowly and saying, "She always did talk like she owned the place." Another, a young couple who'd been fined for painting their door navy instead of slate, asked for extra copies. A third said nothing, just opened their garage, wheeled their trash bin 2 inches closer to the curb and muttered, "Let her find me again." Momentum. It wasn't fireworks, but it was movement. And at the heart of it all was the original charter, my dad's version, the one with no inflated penalties, no secret clauses, no silent control. It felt like passing out old maps that pointed to freedom. Around midnight, I found Leah on the porch bench, arms crossed, looking out at the street like she was waiting for something. I sat beside her. "You think we'll win?" she asked. "We don't have to win," I said. "We just have to show people how they're losing." She was quiet for a long while. Then she whispered, "He'd be proud of you, you know." I didn't answer right away. Just leaned back and looked up at the stars, the same sky he used to point at when he didn't have words anymore. Leah slid the badge from her pocket and turned it in her fingers. "I was proud of you too," I said finally. She didn't reply, but she didn't need to. Some things don't need a stamp to be official. Would you stand up if your entire neighborhood was being misled by fake rules, or would you wait, hoping someone else speaks first? Drop your answer in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Someone's about to break the silence, and it's not who Meredith expects. It was nearly midnight when I heard the knock. Not loud, not frantic, just careful. Opened the door to find Diane Trent standing there in a long coat, holding a tote bag like it contained something fragile. Her eyes were rimmed with red, and her mouth pressed into the kind of tight line that usually comes after a long argument with yourself. "I can't sleep," she said quietly. I stepped aside. She didn't sit, just walked to the edge of the living room, her eyes catching on the folder on my table, the one labeled Charter Discrepancy. "You found it," she whispered. I nodded. Victor helped me read through it. Clause 7 changes everything. Diane lowered herself onto the bench by the window. Yes, that bench. My father's bench. It groaned a little under her, like it recognized someone carrying the weight of old silence. She placed the tote on her lap and opened it slowly, like the zipper might scream. "Have something," she said. "I should have handed it over weeks ago." She pulled out a flash drive and a folder clipped shut with a rusted pin. After Meredith promoted herself to permanent chair, she asked me to clean up the digital archives. She didn't say it directly, but she wanted the minutes to match her story. I didn't speak. Deanne continued. "I couldn't bring myself to delete everything. I made copies. I didn't know what I'd do with them, but after Leah stood her ground with the cops, something snapped." I walked over and sat across from her. Quiet. She handed me the drive first. "It has original meeting recordings, audio files. Some of them are damning. And this?" I gestured to the folder. She hesitated, then passed it over. Inside, paper minutes, annotated. Her handwriting. The real votes. The real outcomes. None of it matched the versions posted on the HOA site. My chest felt tight, not from fear, but because silence had finally cracked. "She threatened to fine me out of my position," Diane said. "Said if I couldn't align with the board, she'd recommend my removal. I thought she couldn't do that." "She can't," I said. "She said it wouldn't matter." I believed that. Meredith was always 2 steps ahead. Until now. "You're not the first she's scared into silence," I told her, "but you might be the first to step forward." Diane's hand shook a little, not from cold, from relief maybe. "She's gonna come after me," she said. "She already is. That list she's keeping, you're on it now." I figured. "But now you're not on it alone." Diane looked up, her eyes softened. "I was there the day they approved the bench," she said, nodding toward the window. "Your dad fought for it. Said a neighborhood without somewhere to sit together wasn't a community, it was just buildings with opinions." I smiled. It stung. "Helped made me tea once," she added. "Chamomile. Called it a good neutral when you're surrounded by loud people." I've never forgotten that. Neither had I. Diane stood, her coat slumped off one shoulder, and she didn't bother fixing it. "I'll testify, if it comes to that," she said. "Just don't let her win." "She won't." She lingered on the porch, looked at the magnolia tree like she was seeing it bloom for the first time. And then she walked into the night, slow but lighter than when she'd arrived. Inside, I booted up my laptop and backed up everything. Audio, notes, signatures. The confession was quiet, private, but it cracked the whole board. We weren't just gathering evidence anymore. We were preparing an airstrike. I spent the next morning with the blinds half drawn and my laptop humming like a war drum. Everything Diane gave me, audio files, paper notes, vote logs, I duplicated. Once on the cloud, once on an external drive I kept in the freezer, yes, really, heat damage insurance, and once more onto a second flash drive that I slipped into Leah's school binder. Just in case, I told her. She looked at me like I'd handed her a blueprint to a bomb. Are we actually doing this? She asked. We already did, I said. Now we make sure the rest of them see it. By noon, Victor was back at the table, coffee in one hand, a printout of the HOA bylaws in the other. I've reviewed the minutes, he said. You've got more than a case. You've got leverage. What kind of leverage? The kind Meredith can't predict. She's used to loud resistance. You've stayed surgical. I nodded. Screaming gets dismissed, but digital trails? Those leave bruises. Victor smiled. She thinks I'm emotional, I added. She hasn't seen me focused. We agreed on a plan. 2 parts, presentation and bait. The presentation would happen at the next HOA board meeting, open to residents. Not a hearing, not a protest, just truth laid out, file by file, timestamp by timestamp. The bait? That needed something trickier. That afternoon, I emailed Meredith. Simple message. Subject: refine payment dispute, happy to resolve quietly. I attached a doctored file, one that showed my bench fine had already been rescinded by a vote that never actually happened, a fake. The kind of bait someone with something to hide might eagerly confirm. And she took it. 1 hour later, Meredith responded. Thanks for the quick resolution. I've updated the system to reflect your compliance. Translation, she admitted on record, to acting on an invalid document, a document I created as a test. Victor nearly choked on his coffee when I showed him. You just got her to validate your forgery, he said. She's been validating her own for years, I replied. I just mirrored the habit. By evening, I had everything ready. Audio clips clipped for timestamps, Diane's scanned confessions cleanly labeled, original charter uploaded and backed by Victor's signed affidavit. Leah watched as I prepped my slides. Yes, slides. You're going all in, she said. Presentation's half the war. She hesitated. Do you think she knows yet that it's coming? No, I said, because for people like Meredith, the truth doesn't exist unless they say it does. Leah opened her bag, checked the flash drive. You really trust me to hold this? I trust you to know when not to give it up. She smiled, tight but proud. Before bed, I took one last walk through the yard. The air smelled like pine mulch and the cheap fertilizer the HOA required. Every house on our row had the exact same front hedges, trimmed to the same angle, cookie-cutter control. Except mine. I'd planted lavender, unapproved, fragrant, messy. As I passed the bench, I reached down and touched the carved initials on the underside. TV, faded but still there. My father would have loved this part. The setup, the planning, the slow, cold strategy of it all. They built this neighborhood on rules. I was about to rewrite them with receipts. 2 days before the board meeting, I woke up to find someone had ripped out my lavender. Clean sweep, roots, stems, soil gone. Left behind was a neat patch of HO-approved sod, still damp, like it hadn't even had time to settle. No note, no warning, just silence. Leah came outside behind me, barefoot, holding a mug too big for her hands. She looked down at the empty flower bed, then back up at me. They really don't know when to stop, do they? They may think this is a warning. Looks more like fear. I crouched down, dug my fingers into the damp dirt. Something was buried just under the surface. A flag? One of those plastic survey markers, bright orange. I yanked it out and stared at it. A fresh staking line. Someone was preparing to redraw my yard. That's when I knew Meredith was panicking. She'd seen something, heard something, or maybe someone had finally whispered the truth in her ear. That I wasn't just collecting evidence, I was preparing to detonate it. Across the street, 2 neighbors stood on their porch, watching. Not hiding, not pretending. They didn't wave, but they didn't look away either. Progress. Later that afternoon, Leah asked if she could host a study circle on our lawn. raised an eyebrow. You mean like flashcards and soda? Sort of, she said, slipping a printed flyer onto the table. Know Your Rights, teen workshop on civic codes and HOA law. I stared at her, stunned. You made this? She shrugged. Nobody tells us this stuff. Thought we should learn. Thought it might help. You're your grandfather's granddaughter, I said. By 5 o'clock, we had folding chairs set up on the grass. 12 kids showed up, plus 3 parents who lingered with arms crossed and curious eyes. Leah led the talk. I chimed in when someone asked about fines, bylaws, or why one neighbor got cited for a wind spinner and another didn't. I kept it factual, clean, no agenda. By the time the sun dipped below the roof lines, 3 more residents had asked for copies of the original charter. Victor dropped by halfway through, just watched for a while, hands behind his back, like he was evaluating a courtroom. Afterward, he pulled me aside. You know what this is, right? Hope, I guessed. He shook his head. Precedent. Before bed, I planted a single marigold in the spot where the lavender used to be. It wasn't for beauty. It was a message. Marigolds don't ask for permission. They grow anyway. Around 10, an email hit the community thread from Meredith. Reminder, unauthorized gatherings without HOA clearance are subject to citation. Lawn use is regulated. Non-compliance may result in property inspection. Translation, she saw the meeting, and she didn't like it. The reply started within minutes. A neighbor, just Mem Chan, Lot 6, wrote, Didn't we approve yard use for family events 2 years ago? Another chimed in. What inspection? Who voted on that? A third replied with a screenshot of the clause Victor had highlighted. Clause 7. They were waking up. Not to war. By midnight, the community thread had 34 responses, half of them questioning Meredith, some just asking to see the charter, a few asking when the next meeting was. Leah stood in the hallway, scrolling her phone. You see this? I saw. She smirked. Guess your lavender's not the only thing they tried to rip out. Nope, I said, but ideas have deeper roots. I shut off the porch light. Let them come. This garden wasn't theirs to trim anymore. If someone tried to erase your voice by digging up your roots, what would you plant in return? Drop your answer below and tell me where you're watching from. Because they tried to bury Nora's fight, but tomorrow she hands them the blueprint they never expected. The letter came, folded in thirds, tucked under the welcome mat like an apology dressed in corporate font. Leah spotted it first on her way back from school and handed it to me with a raised eyebrow. New threat or old threat? I didn't answer right away. I unfolded it at the kitchen counter, read it twice, and exhaled. Special assembly, I said. Meredith just tried to fast-track a meeting. She's allowed to do that? She's allowed to request one, I corrected, but not dictate the terms, and definitely not call it a disciplinary session without board approval. Leah leaned against the counter, still in her hoodie, still in her calm fire mode. Is this her trying to scare people before we show the real stuff? She knows what's coming, I said. She's trying to muddy the water before it's clear. By noon, Victor showed up with 2 binders, a folder marked chain of custody, and a copy of the founding charter I'd framed the night before. She's bluffing, he said. If we show up ready, she can't block us. She can't unwrite what's already documented. We bring Diane? I asked. Victor nodded. She's in. She'll speak. She wants it done. That night, Leah sat cross-legged on the floor printing flyers. Minimal text, just bold, quiet truths. Know Your Rights. HOA Assembly. All residents welcome. She passed them to a few trusted neighbors. One posted it inside the clubhouse bulletin. Another taped it under mailbox slots. No slogans, no noise, just an invitation to hear the other side. Meredith responded with an email blast before midnight. Due to unauthorized communications and growing misinformation, the HOA will meet Friday evening to address recent community disruption. Please refrain from distributing unverified documents. The tone was unmistakable, rattled, controlled panic disguised as formality. Friday arrived with gray skies and a stiff wind that felt like a turning page. I wore my navy blazer, the one my father gave me after I landed my first government contract. Leah walked beside me, backpack slung over one shoulder, flash drive zipped inside. You nervous? She asked. No, I said. tired of silence. Victor met us at the rec room. It was packed, more residents than I'd ever seen together, some standing, some whispering, some watching like they already knew what tonight meant, but didn't want to admit it out loud. Meredith was already seated, gavel in hand. Diane sat beside her, stiff-backed, hands folded in her lap. But she didn't look at Meredith, not once. Meredith stood and opened the meeting with her usual sugar-dipped steel. "We're here to clarify misunderstandings," she said. "Certain residents have circulated unvetted materials that may confuse or harm our sense of unity. This meeting is to ensure order and transparency." I stood slowly. "I'd like to present evidence per Article 5C of the Charter. I've collected 12 resident signatures to validate floor time." Meredith's lips thinned. "I haven't received those signatures." Victor stepped forward and placed the paper stack in front of her. "Now you have." For a moment, no one breathed. 5 minutes, she said. I clicked the projector remote. Slide 1, the founding charter, signed and scanned. Clause 7, circled. Slide 2, 2 sets of minutes, one published by Meredith, the other from Diane's private archive. Same meeting, different outcome. Slide 3, audio waveform. Then Diane stood. "Ashman?" "I falsified vote records," she said. Under pressure, I didn't know how to stop it. "But it ends tonight." Gasps rippled through the room. Not shock, confirmation. People had suspected, now they knew. Meredith slammed her gavel. "These accusations are slanderous and unsupported." Victor stepped forward again. "All files have been notarized and submitted to the county clerk. Attempting to delete or modify them now constitutes obstruction." The room shifted. Not loud, not angry, just heavy with consequence. A neighbor in the back stood up. "I move to suspend Meredith Langston as chair pending investigation." Another rose. "Seconded." I didn't smile, I didn't gloat. I just watched Meredith stare into a room that no longer feared her. And that was enough. Meredith didn't leave her seat. She didn't argue, didn't slam the gavel again, didn't say a single word as the vote moved forward. Her face had hardened into something brittle and expressionless, like even she wasn't sure how this had happened so fast. But it hadn't been fast. It had been years of slow, quiet control unraveling inch by inch. I stood back as neighbors, people who had once smiled with stiff HOA-approved politeness, raised their hands, one after another, suspended. Effective immediately. She couldn't stop it. Not now, not when Diane had spoken, not when the charter, the real one, sat printed and sealed in front of every resident in the room. Victor tapped his binder shut with finality. Meredith finally stood. She didn't look at me, not directly, just past me. Like I was a smudge on a window she no longer had the energy to clean. "You think you've won something," she said under her breath as she passed. I looked her straight in the eye. "I didn't win anything. You lost what you were never supposed to hold." Outside, the air was thick with that after-storm hush. Not rain, just relief. The kind that settles in your shoulders when you don't realize how heavy they've been until the weight lifts. Leah came up beside me. "People are still talking." I don't blame them. A group of teenagers lingered under the clubhouse awning, whispering and scrolling. One of them pointed at Leah and whispered something. She didn't shrink. Instead, she walked over and said, "If you want the files, I can text them. They're all public now." They nodded. She pulled out her phone. That was the moment I realized this was never just about me or my yard or even the bench. This was about a neighborhood that forgot how to say no. Back at the house, Diane showed up 20 minutes later. She didn't ring the doorbell, just stepped onto the porch and sat at the edge of the bench like it belonged to all of us now. "I was sure someone would shout me down," she said quietly. "Belly couldn't. You told the truth. I waited too long." "You came through," I said. "That's what matters." She handed me a small envelope. "This was mailed to the board anonymously 6 months ago. I kept it." Inside was a printout. An HOA complaint form, unsigned. It listed Leah by name, said she was creating unease. Below it, a scribbled note in unfamiliar handwriting. "We need to pressure her out before she becomes a problem." I folded the paper slowly. She already was a problem for them. Diane nodded, and now she's a reminder. That night, Leah and I sat on the porch. The sky was clear for once, no clouds, no wind, just stars that had waited their turn to be noticed. I passed her the paper Diane had given me. She read it, didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, she said, "They tried to erase me before I even started." Yeah. She leaned against my shoulder. "Feels weird, winning like this." "It's not really winning, it's clearing space." "For what?" I smiled. "For whatever comes next." She reached into her bag and pulled out the badge. It wasn't shiny anymore. The edges had dulled, one corner was bent, but it looked earned. "You gonna keep that?" She looked down at it. "No. I think I'm gonna frame it, hang it up next to the porch photo. The one of her and my dad, the one where they were laughing, the one where she wasn't scared." I stood and looked out over the lawn. They'd tried to clean it into silence, cut it down, shape it up, color it inside invisible lines. But tonight, it looked like ours again. No lights from Meredith's house. 3 weeks after the vote, I brought the bench back. It had waited long enough. I carried it out at sunrise, the wood still smooth from the last time I sanded it, still sturdy in all the right places. I set it beneath the magnolia, just like my father did when he first built it, back when Leah was barely tall enough to climb onto the seat without help. The soil gave easily. Maybe it remembered the legs. Maybe memory sits deeper in roots than we realize. Leah stepped out, yawning into her sleeve. "You did it without me?" "You needed sleep." She looked at the bench, squinted against the morning light. "It's where it belongs." Finally, the neighborhood felt different now, not in the way that makes you pause, but in the way that makes you breathe. There was no gavel, no title next to Meredith's name anymore. No more surprise citations on Tuesday mornings, no more altered minutes, no more rigged votes. Diane had taken over as interim chair until the election, and Victor was advising the new board until they could find someone permanent. I'd declined when asked to run. I didn't want power. I wanted peace. As for Meredith, she disappeared the way people like her do, silently. Curtains gone one day, mailbox empty the next, no note, no goodbye. This vacancy. That afternoon, Diane dropped by with a potted lavender plant and a smile that still trembled around the edges. "I know it's not regulation," she said, placing it near the porch. I smiled. "That's why it's perfect." She sat on the bench with me. We didn't talk about minutes or audio files or the vote. We talked about the garden she used to keep before the HOA told her vines were unruly. About the neighbor who used to hand out tangerines from his truck. About the time her mom painted every flower pot a different color, just because. We talked like we remembered something we hadn't felt in years. Leah joined us after school. She dropped her bag, sat cross-legged on the grass, and leaned back on her hands. "I have to write a speech," she said. "The city wants me to speak at the Youth Legal Forum. Are you going to tell them what happened here?" I was thinking of reading the charter instead. Diane chuckled. "The original one?" Leah grinned. "Of course." Later, as the sun dipped low, I walked back into the garage to put the wrench away. On the workbench sat the old Polaroid again. Me and Dad on that very bench, laughing like the future didn't scare us yet. I slipped it into a new frame and hung it by the door. Inside, Leah pulled out the badge. It was scratched now, dulled around the edges, but it didn't need to shine. She held it for a second, then clipped it into a shadow box next to the framed porch photo. "Too many people see this and think I was lucky," she said. "I wasn't. I was ready." "You earned it." She nodded. "So did you." By Sunday, neighbors began stopping by. One brought muffins, another brought questions. A teen down the street asked Leah if she'd help set up a civic workshop at school. She said yes before I could blink. No banners, no balloons, just people, slowly reclaiming space. The new board passed its first resolution that week. All HOA communications must now be documented, verified by vote, and made available to residents within 5 days. No more anonymous notes, no more pretend rules. Nobody mentioned Meredith, but her silence had finally been replaced by something better. Voices that didn't need permission to speak. That evening, Leah and I sat on the bench again. She stretched out, arms behind her head, eyes on the sky. You think Grandpa would have liked what we did? Wouldn't have said it. But he would have built you a second bench. She laughed. Matching? Absolutely not. It would have driven the board insane. She leaned her head against my shoulder. I think this place is finally becoming home again. And she was right, because justice isn't always loud. Dignity doesn't need approval. And legacy? Sometimes it's just a bench, standing exactly where it's meant to. They tried to fine us into silence. They buried the bench, erased the truth, and called it order. But we didn't fight to win, we fought to be heard. And in the end, that was louder than anything they wrote on paper. Have you ever had to stand your ground when the rules were used against you? Tell me where you're watching from, and drop your story in the comments. Because someone out there needs to know it's okay to fight back. And sometimes, a bench is more than wood. It's a line they'll never cross again.